Welcome, fearless viewers, to another chilling tale from our realm of horror. Tonight, we delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche, where shadows lurk and fear reigns supreme. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and join our growing community of horror enthusiasts. Help us reach our next milestone of 700 subscribers, as we continue to uncover spine-tingling stories that will haunt your dreams. Now, brace yourself, as the journey into the unknown begins. This happened back in 2003. I used to work at a Walgreens, and if anybody doesn't know, it's a popular pharmacy store chain that also sells lots of other items. The stores are not that large usually, and generally never too busy either. Most of the time, there's a pretty calm feeling inside. The store that I worked at used to be open 24 hours. I'm not sure if it still is, but I know that it was when I worked there. So usually when I was working overnights, I would be all by myself for most of my shift. There really wasn't a need to have anybody else there, because I could handle everything. And we never got that many overnight customers. I was also able to walk to and from work, which was very nice. I had an apartment that was just down the street and a couple of blocks over. So it would only take me about 10 minutes. Usually I worked 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And it wasn't that late yet when I walked to work and wasn't too early when I walked back. One time when I was working an overnight shift, everything was going normal and it was about 1 a.m. I believe. I remember that I heard the automatic doors opening and glanced over to see a woman entering the store. She appeared to be about 40, had dark brown hair, was maybe 5'2" or 5'3", and pretty thin. After entering, the woman looked in my direction and said hi, and I said hi back to her. She then walked down one of the aisles, and I focused my attention elsewhere. I was just standing behind the counter at the checkouts. We only had to check lanes, but most of the time only had one open. Several minutes went by. Now I occasionally saw the woman, but I wasn't watching her anything. She just seemed to be shopping normally. But at one point I was just casually looking around. And I saw the woman standing like half behind an aisle. She was holding a small video camera, it appeared, and holding it in a way that it looked like she was filming or taking my picture. I looked at her wondering what was going on. It was like she was kind of trying to hide it too, because she was about halfway obscured. I found this really strange. After a couple of seconds of this, her camera went down suddenly, and she disappeared behind the aisle. I thought that it was odd, but not the biggest deal. About a minute later, the woman walked up to the left, near the exits. She said goodnight to me as she walked out without even buying anything. I said goodnight to her, but was a little bit weirded out by the whole experience. But after she was gone, I quickly forgot about it. I mean, yeah, it was strange that she was filming me or whatever. But it's not the creepiest thing in the world. Hours went by, and several more customers came in. All of them were pretty normal. When 6 a.m. arrived, I was off and another coworker was there. I left Walgreens and then headed back to my apartment by walking along the sidewalk. It was still dark out and things were very quiet. Just the occasional car would pass me by on the road. As I was walking back though, one thing that was a little different was that I heard somebody walking waist behind me. It was footsteps, but a good distance away. I was sort of curious, but didn't look back until I crossed over one block. As I did, I glanced over and the same woman was walking. I found this really strange. After I crossed the street, I crossed another, and then went along that sidewalk that would take me all the way back to my apartment. I didn't think the woman would do the same. But she did. That's when I started to get really creeped out. Her whole personality just seemed kind of mysterious. Even when she had spoken to me saying hi, and by the woman continued to walk behind me. It was a long ways back. Soon I reached my apartment. I was really glad to see that she hadn't seemed to gain on me or anything. She was still about the same distance behind. Now you had to use your key to enter the apartment building. And then I had a separate key for my unit. This made me feel better if I could just get inside. Who knows why this lady was following me? but I knew that she didn't live here. I entered my building and then went up to my apartment, which was on the second floor. My apartment was at the front side of the building, so I could look out onto the street where the woman had been walking. After I got inside, I went to the window and looked out. I saw the woman standing there on the sidewalk. She had her camera out again and was appearing to take a video of me at my window. This was just really strange. I ducked down to get out of her sight. Now she was just taking a video of my apartment window. What was the point of this? After several minutes, I looked again, and she was gone. I went on with my normal routine after that. I would relax after work and eventually fall asleep. Obviously, my hours of being awake were very different than most people with me having to work overnight hours. So I fell asleep that day, probably at around 9 o'clock in the morning or so. When I woke up, I remember that it was almost 2 p.m. That was a little bit earlier than I usually woke up. But then I remember hearing the sound of somebody trying to open my apartment door. I walked over to the door and then looked through the people. What I saw was a woman walking away. I just barely saw her. But it was the same woman from before. I was now extremely creeped out by this. After she left, I didn't know what to do. I watched her leave the building and then walk away down the sidewalk rather quickly. I really don't know how she got in, probably snuck in as somebody else was leaving, which is very possible. I decided to call the police and tell them everything they came out to investigate. And I gave them all the information that I could. I didn't really know what else to do. They said they would look into it. And after that I never heard anything more. I also never saw the woman again. It still creeps me out when I think about it. Obviously, I don't work at Walgreens anymore and haven't for many years. I also don't live in that apartment or even the same city anymore. I still wondered what that woman was doing. I used to work at a JCPenney department store. For those who don't know, it's mostly a clothing store, but also has things like home decor. I worked there for a year and a half, and this was back in 2018 and 2019. One night, I was working until 9 p.m. Things were busy for a while, but then got very quiet. I didn't have as much to do during the last several hours of my shift. Things were pretty quiet around the store, and there were very few customers shopping. I was just sitting behind the service desk and didn't really have much to do. I saw this one guy shopping, who seemed to have been there for a while, because I remember I had noticed him earlier. He was kind of tall and thin and was wearing a hat. He never got all that close to me. But I saw him walk down an aisle a ways away. Then like an hour later, I saw him again. He didn't have anything in his hands or a cart. He also didn't seem to be with anybody. I wondered why he was here for so long. But it didn't seem like all that big of a deal to me. As the final hour that we were open went by and 9 o'clock approached, I saw him a couple of more times. He seemed to almost just be wandering around the store. The guy wasn't really looking at anything. As we got to closing time, the announcements were made over the store that we would be closing soon, and customers should finish up their shopping and make final purchases. When it was less than 5 minutes to close, I saw the man again. He still didn't have any items that he was going to buy or anything. Then he kind of went out of my sight. When it was 9 o'clock, I could just go over, punch out, and leave. I did not have to do anything afterwards like cleaning or organizing. A few other people would stay after for a bit doing that. I headed out the doors just after 9 p.m. The JCPenney's was located in a large shopping area. There were a couple of stores directly to the right and left of us, and there was a very large parking lot for all of them. By now, the parking lot, especially in front of our store, was almost completely empty. My car sat a long ways back, and I walked out to it by myself. It didn't take long though, and I soon noticed the man that I had seen inside. There was a little curb with several feet of grass, which ran along the end of our parking lot, separating ourselves from the next business over. The man was walking in the grass along the curb. I wasn't really sure why, but I didn't really care either. I was just trying to get to my car. I will admit, though, I found it to be a little bit odd, especially after seeing him so much in the store. He was probably about 100 feet away though. When I was still walking to my car, I heard the man suddenly start to yell something. I looked over at him and he was waving at me. I waved to be friendly and was wondering what was going on. The man then waved at me again and called me over to him. I said that I really had to get home and then kept walking to my car. I looked away and kind of had a bad feeling, but tried to just ignore it and get to my vehicle. I heard footsteps a ways back and could tell that the guy was coming over. When I turned to look, I saw that the man was now jogging over to me. He wasn't aggressively running or anything. I didn't feel endangered by it. But I was certainly suspicious and I wanted him to stop. When he was jogging over, I got to my car and went inside. When I did, I looked up to see the man was now about 10 feet away from me. I locked my doors just to be safe. As he approached my driver's door, he was smiling and seemed sort of friendly. But he still had some bizarre behavior that made me suspicious of him. I rolled down my window slightly and the guy said hi to me. He then asked me where I was going in such a hurry. I said I was just going home. Then he made some comment about when he was jogging over. I looked nervous. I said that I was just tired from a long day of work. The guy that asked me if I wouldn't mind giving him a ride home. Obviously, I wasn't going to. I said no thanks. And then told him that there was a bus stop not far away from here. The guy that asked me if I could just give him a ride to a nearby convenience store. Once again, I said no. Finally, he said okay, and started to walk away from my vehicle. After that, I drove home in all my time working at JCPenney. After that, I never saw the guy again. I still wonder though, why that guy was acting so strange. I'm really glad that I got inside my car when I did, and that I didn't let that man inside my car. A few years back, I worked at a hotel. When I started, I was working at the front desk during overnight hours. The hotel was pretty average size, maybe a little bit large. We don't have any restaurants or bars connected or anything like that, but have lots of rooms. I would sit behind the front desk and most of the time overnights, nothing happened here and there, people would come or go. But most people didn't need to talk to me. This made my job really easy. And I didn't mind being up all night. The event that I'm going to tell you about occurred at just after 2 o'clock in the morning one night. I was working behind the front desk, and I faced the lobby and elevators. To my left, there was a lounge area and a hallway that led to rooms on the first floor. Everything was very quiet until a man entered the hotel. He walked inside and went right past me. I assumed that he was staying at the hotel and was just returning to his room. The guy was pretty average height, like brown hair, mid-30s. He walked down the hallway and was gone. About 5 minutes later though, he walked by again, this time going to the other hallway. I still didn't think anything of it. But I soon saw him another time. He was once again walking past from one hallway to another. It was sort of behind me, but still in plain sight. It seemed a little bit odd, but there was nothing wrong with it. Several minutes later, I went to go get some water. There was a dispenser in the lounge, and you had to walk past the hallway to get there. As I was passing by, I noticed somebody in the hallway a ways down. I looked and noticed that it was the same guy. He was standing outside of a door. And it appeared as though he couldn't get inside but was trying to. I thought maybe he was locked out of his room. Or possibly he was trying to get into somebody else's. I started to walk over to him and was going to ask him if he needed help with something. When I got a few steps closer to him, he stopped and looked at me. Before I could say anything, the guy turned and then walked away in the other direction. Then he disappeared around the corner. It was really suspicious. I started to figure that the guy probably didn't even have a room here. I went back to my front desk and decided to look at the security monitors. We had cameras in every single hallway. Unfortunately, the video quality was honestly quite bad, and the details were hard to make out. I looked around until I spotted the guy on one of the cameras. He walked past it down a hallway, and he went to a door and appeared to try to open it. It looked like possibly he was knocking on the door then or something. He was standing at it for a while. Then he paced around a little before returning to the door. This was too suspicious, and I decided to go ask him what was going on. I got up and walked over to where the guy was. The hallways could get a little bit complicated on the first floor. The second and third floor was very simple, but the first floor had more hallways. I walked to the one that the man was at. When I reached the beginning of the hallway, I saw him. He was a waist down, probably almost 100 feet. Almost as soon as I was within sight of him, he looked over to me. I asked him what he was doing. The guy just started sprinting towards me, then he appeared to be running as fast as he possibly could. This wasn't what I was expecting, and I moved back and started heading towards the front. The guy was still running and quickly approaching me. By the time I got back to the lobby, he was a lot closer. I could hear him running. I decided to run out of the hotel and see if the man would after I made it outside. I realized that he did in fact follow me out. And he was also a lot closer than I expected. Now only about 40 feet away probably. I didn't think that I would be able to get to my car on time if he was chasing me. So I ran across the street, and a little ways down was a 24-hour gas station. So I ran all the way there, and when I got there I went inside. The guy hadn't crossed the street and stayed in the hotel parking lot. I think he went back in the hotel after that, but I called the police. I reported this suspicious man trying to enter hotel rooms and chasing me when I confronted him. The police were very quick to respond and got there only like a minute later. They entered the hotel which the man was still inside of. He tried running away, but was caught and removed from the hotel. He wouldn't say what he was doing there, or why he was trying to get inside of rooms. After that I talked with police for a while and then returned to work. I was really creeped out by the whole situation, but grateful to be all right. That was an experience that made me want to stop working overnights, and I did shortly after.